The emergency beacon stopped transmitting at 11:47 p.m. on March 15, 2019. Three experienced hikers, Elena Vasquez and Daria Kaslovad, activated their personal locator beacon from somewhere deep inside the Cascade Volcanic Complex. The signal originated from a depth of 180 feet underground, in a section of lava tubes that official geological surveys claimed didn't exist. When rescue teams reached the coordinates 12 hours later, they found nothing but solid basalt rock and a single hiking boot with fresh scorch marks on the sole. Marcus Chen wasn't supposed to be there. The 34-year-old geologist had spent 6 months mapping unstable volcanic formations for the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network. He knew exactly which caves were safe and which ones could collapse without warning. Elena Vasquez had climbed every major peak from Alaska to California in the past decade. Daria Kozlova could navigate underground systems in complete darkness using nothing but sound and air pressure. These weren't weekend warriors who got lost taking selfies. The question that haunted investigators for 5 years wasn't how they disappeared, it was how they managed to send a distress signal from a place that couldn't exist. The last photograph uploaded to Marcus's Instagram account showed the three of them standing at the entrance to what looked like a natural cathedral carved from black volcanic glass. The timestamp read to 33 p.m. March 15th. The geolocation data replaced them at coordinates that fell directly inside a mountain. Elena's final text message to her sister arrived 47 minutes later. Found something incredible down here. Signal getting weak. We'll call when we surface. Her phone records showed the message was sent from 240 feet below ground level. What rescue teams discovered 5 years later changed everything they thought they knew about the 2019 disappearance. Spelunkers working for a private mining survey were using ground-penetrating radar to map mineral deposits when their equipment detected a massive void space that shouldn't have existed. The cavity measured roughly 400 feet long, 60 feet wide, and 30 feet high, carved directly through the heart of solid volcanic rock. When they finally broke through the collapsed entrance in September 2024, they found skeletal remains arranged in a perfect triangle, as if the three hikers had died holding hands in the center of an enormous underground chamber. The skeletons were positioned exactly 12 feet apart from each other. Each one faced toward the chamber's center, where rescue teams found a pile of electronic equipment that had been carefully stacked into a pyramid. 2 digital cameras, 3 cell phones, a GPS unit, and the emergency beacon that had transmitted their final distress call. Every single device was still functional despite spending 5 years in a cave system with 90% humidity. Marcus Chen's camera contained 247 photographs taken during their final day underground. The images showed them descending through a series of natural tunnels that grew increasingly elaborate as they went deeper. By photograph 180, the walls around them were covered in geometric patterns that looked almost architectural, perfectly straight lines and right angles, carved into volcanic rock that had formed millions of years ago. Elena's phone had recorded a 23-minute video of their final hours alive. The video started with Elena laughing as she filmed Marcus taking core samples from the chamber walls. The timestamp showed 9:15 p.m. on March 15th. The audio was crystal clear. You could hear water dripping somewhere in the distance, their breathing echoing off stone walls, and a low rumbling sound that Marcus identified as geothermal activity. At the 14-minute mark, the rumbling stopped completely. The silence was so absolute that Elena whispered, "Can you hear that?" And the whisper seemed to hang in the air for several seconds. What happened next appears on the video but makes no geological sense. At timestamped 1542, cracks began appearing in the chamber walls, not random fractures caused by seismic activity, perfectly parallel lines that spread across the stone surfaces in a grid pattern, as if someone was carving them from the inside. The cracks glowed with a faint orange light that the camera's automatic settings struggled to adjust for. Marcus can be heard saying that's impossible 3 times in 15 seconds. Daria started reading compass headings that placed magnetic north in 4 different directions simultaneously. The video's final 2 minutes show the 3 hikers activating their emergency beacon while the chamber walls continued cracking in geometrically perfect patterns. Elena kept the camera steady even as basketball-sized chunks of ceiling began falling around them. The last clear image shows Marcus holding up a rock sample that appeared to be glowing from within. His final words, captured clearly on audio, were, "This isn't volcanic rock. This isn't rock at all." The video ends abruptly at timestamp 1833. The emergency beacon continued transmitting for 3 hours and 14 minutes after the camera stopped recording. Forensic analysis of the skeletal remains revealed details that contradicted everything the video evidence suggested. All 3 hikers had died from acute dehydration and starvation. The condition of their bones indicated they had survived in the sealed chamber for approximately 6 weeks after the cave-in. They had consumed their emergency food supplies, their leather boots, and finally their own clothing before dying of malnutrition. The arrangement of their skeletons suggested they had died within hours of each other, still arranged in the same triangle formation where rescue teams found them 5 years later. But the sealed chamber contained no water source, no food, and no breathable air circulation. The atmospheric analysis showed oxygen levels that would have killed them within 72 hours. The chamber temperature averaged 47 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to preserve organic material, but not cold enough to explain how 3 people survived for 6 weeks in a space the size of a large classroom. Marcus Chin's geological equipment recorded environmental data throughout their time in the chamber. The sensors logged temperature, humidity, air pressure, and seismic activity every 15 minutes until the batteries died 43 days after they were sealed inside. The data showed that the chamber's atmospheric conditions remained completely stable for the entire 6-week period. No temperature fluctuations, no air pressure changes, no seismic activity that would indicate ongoing cave-ins or geological shifts. The environmental readings also recorded something that atmospheric scientists are still trying to explain. Starting on day 12 of their entrapment, the sensors began detecting trace amounts of methane, hydrogen sulfide, and sulfur dioxide in the chamber's atmosphere. These gases typically indicate active volcanic processes or decomposing organic matter, but the concentrations increased steadily over the remaining 31 days, reaching levels that should have been immediately lethal. The final sensor readings, recorded on day 43, showed atmospheric conditions that would have killed the hikers within minutes of exposure. Yet the skeletal remains showed no signs of gas poisoning or chemical burns. The mining survey team that discovered the chamber made one final observation that investigators haven't been able to explain. When they broke through the collapsed entrance using hydraulic equipment, they found that the rock blocking the tunnel entrance was volcanic glass, the same material that forms when lava cools rapidly in contact with water or air. The glass formation was perfectly smooth on the interior surface, as if it had been poured into place while molten, then allowed to cool into an airtight seal. Geological analysis confirmed that this glass had formed within the past 5 years, but the nearest active volcanic system is located 847 miles away. The rock surrounding the chamber showed no signs of recent thermal activity, lava flows, or magmatic intrusion. The volcanic glass had somehow formed at room temperature in a location with no volcanic activity, creating a perfect seal that trapped 3 experienced hikers in a chamber that shouldn't have existed. The rescue team's final inventory of the sealed chamber included one item that appears nowhere in the 247 photographs or 23-minute video recorded by the victims. Lying directly beneath the pyramid of electronic equipment, they found a piece of volcanic rock that matched no known mineral formations in the Pacific Northwest. The sample weighed exactly 8 pounds and was perfectly spherical, as if it had been carved by machine tools. When researchers attempted to take core samples for analysis, their diamond-tipped drill bits couldn't penetrate the surface. The rock sample is currently stored at the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network Research Facility in Seattle. It has been photographed, X-rayed, and subjected to every non-destructive analysis technique available to modern geology. The internal structure appears to be completely solid, with no air pockets, crystal formations, or mineral variations. The surface temperature remains constant at exactly 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of the ambient temperature in the storage facility. 5 years after Marcus Chin, Elena Vasquez and Daria Kozlova entered an unmapped cave system and never returned. Investigators have concluded their case with more questions than answers. 3 experienced outdoor enthusiasts died of starvation in a chamber that contained no food, no water, and no breathable air. They survived for 6 weeks in conditions that should have killed them in 3 days. They were found in a location that didn't exist on any geological survey, sealed behind a wall of volcanic glass that formed without any volcanic activity. The official cause of death remains listed as accidental exposure during a recreational caving expedition. The case file contains 1,247 pages of investigative reports, forensic analysis, and environmental data. It also contains a single recommendation that all hiking permits for the Cascade Volcanic Complex require a minimum group size of 4 people and mandatory check-ins every 24 hours. The lava tube entrance where the 3 hikers began their final descent has been permanently sealed with concrete. The GPS coordinates have been removed from all public geological databases. The chamber where they died remains accessible only through a single tunnel that requires specialized equipment and professional guides to navigate safely. But sometimes, on clear nights when atmospheric conditions are perfect, radio operators in the Pacific Northwest report picking up faint emergency beacon signals from the same coordinates where Marcus, Elena, and Daria transmitted their final distress call. The signals last exactly 3 hours and 14 minutes before cutting off abruptly. They always begin transmitting at 11:47 p.m. on March 15th. The investigation into what happened during those final 6 weeks underground began with Elena Vasquez's sister Carmen, who refused to accept the official explanation. Carmen hired a private forensics expert to analyze the video footage frame by frame. What they discovered in the background of Elena's final recording changed everything. Investigators, I thought they understood about the chamber where 3 people died. At timestamp 1623, while Elena was filming Marcus examining the glowing cracks in the wall, something moved in the darkness behind Daria Kozlova. The movement lasted exactly 4 frames, less than 1/6 of a second, when the footage was enhanced and slowed down. It showed a humanoid silhouette approximately 7 feet tall, standing motionless in the chamber's far corner. The figure appeared to be wearing clothing, but the video resolution was too poor to make out specific details. What was clear was that the figure remained perfectly still while chunks of ceiling crashed down around it. The forensics expert ran the enhanced footage through facial recognition software designed for low-light conditions. The results indicated that the silhouette possessed human proportions but stood at a height that would place it in the 99th percentile for human males. More disturbing was the posture analysis, which suggested the figure's arms hung down past its knees, proportions that don't exist in normal human anatomy. Carmen Vasquez brought this evidence to the King County Sheriff's Department in October 2024. Detective Sarah Mitchell, who had originally worked the missing persons case in 2019, agreed to reopen the investigation. What Detective Mitchell discovered in the department's evidence locker hadn't been mentioned in any of the official reports. Among Marcus Chen's personal effects recovered from the sealed chamber was a field notebook containing 73 pages of handwritten observations. The notebook documented their descent into the cave system hour by hour. Starting from 11:30 a.m. on March 15th, Marcus had recorded air temperature, humidity levels, and atmospheric pressure readings every 30 minutes. But beginning on page 31, his handwriting became increasingly erratic and his observations shifted from scientific measurements to personal experiences that made no rational sense. On page 43, dated March 16th at 3 a.m., Marcus wrote, "Alina, we keeps talking to someone behind me, but when I turn around nobody is there. She says he's been following us since we passed the 3rd chamber. She describes him as tall with long arms, but I can't see anything." Daria confirms she sees him too. Am I losing my mind, or are they? The entry dated March 18th, page 49, contained a detailed sketch of the chamber where their remains were later found. But Marcus's drawing showed 4 figures arranged in a square formation, not the triangle where the skeletons were discovered. The 4th figure was drawn significantly taller than the others, with arms that extended down to its ankles. Underneath the sketch, Marcus had written, "He doesn't eat our food, but he never seems hungry. He doesn't speak, but somehow we understand what he wants. He wants us to stay here." Page 67, dated April 2nd, contained the notebook's final entry. Day 18, Alina died this morning. Daria says the tall man carried her body to the center of the chamber and arranged her in position. I didn't see this happen, but Elena's body moved overnight. The tall man says we need to form a triangle now. He says 3 is the correct number for the signal to work properly. I don't understand what signal he means, but I'm too tired to argue. Detective Mitchell submitted the notebook for handwriting analysis. The expert confirmed that all 73 pages were written by the same person, using the same ballpoint pen. But the writing samples from the final 20 pages showed signs of severe psychological distress. The handwriting exhibited tremors consistent with malnutrition and dehydration, but also patterns associated with prolonged exposure to hallucinogenic compounds. Toxicology tests on the skeletal remains had originally showed no traces of drugs or alcohol in the bone marrow samples. But Detective Mitchell ordered additional tests, specifically looking for naturally occurring psychoactive compounds that might be present in cave environments. The results identified significant concentrations of psilocybin, DMT, and several unidentified alkaloids that don't exist in any known biological database. The toxicology report raised new questions about the atmospheric analysis from Marcus's environmental sensors. The original investigation had focused on the methane and sulfur compounds detected in the chamber's air supply, but when chemists reanalyzed the sensor data looking for organic compounds, they found traces of airborne alkaloids that increased in concentration throughout the 6-week period. By day 43, the air in the sealed chamber contained psychoactive compounds at levels that would induce severe hallucinations in anyone exposed for more than a few hours. The source of these compounds remained unexplained until Detective Mitchell interviewed Dr. Amanda Torres, a mycologist who specialized in cave-dwelling fungi. Dr. Torres had never heard of the 2019 disappearance, but when she saw photographs of the chamber where the hikers died, she immediately recognized the geometric patterns carved into the walls. Those patterns weren't carved by geological processes or human tools. They were created by a species of fungus that Dr. Torres had been tracking for 8 years across underground cave systems throughout the Pacific Northwest. The organism, which she had classified as Ophiocordyceps cascadia, was unlike any known fungal species. It grew exclusively in sealed cave environments with specific atmospheric conditions, high humidity, stable temperature, and elevated carbon dioxide levels. What made Ophiocordyceps cascadia unique was its reproductive strategy. Instead of releasing spores into the air like normal fungi, it produced airborne alkaloids that altered the behavior of mammalian hosts. Affected animals would remain in the fungus's proximity for extended periods. eventually dying of starvation while the organism slowly consumed their decomposing tissue. The geometric patterns on cave walls were actually the fungus's fruiting bodies arranged in mathematical formations that maximized the distribution of psychoactive compounds throughout enclosed spaces. Dr. Torres had documented 17 different cave systems where Ophiocordyceps cascadia had killed small mammals using this strategy, but she had never found evidence of the fungus affecting humans, primarily because most cave systems infected with the organism were too remote or too dangerous for recreational exploration. The chamber where Marcus, Elena, and Daria died was the first known case of human exposure to a mature Ophiocordyceps cascadia colony. The fungal colony explained the hallucinations documented in Marcus's notebook, the psychological distress evident in their final video, and the atmospheric compounds detected by environmental sensors. But it didn't explain how 3 experienced hikers had survived for 6 weeks in a sealed chamber with no food or water, or why their skeletons were found arranged in a perfect triangle formation. Dr. Torres requested permission to return to the sealed chamber with a team of researchers. Detective Mitchell approved the expedition in December 2024, 5 months after the case was reopened. What the research team found inside the chamber provided the final piece of evidence needed to understand what had really happened during those 6 weeks underground. The walls of the chamber were completely covered in Ophiocordyceps cascadia fruiting bodies, arranged in the same geometric patterns visible in Marcus's photographs. But the fungal colony showed signs of recent feeding activity that was impossible to explain using normal biological processes. Tissue samples from various locations throughout the chamber contained human DNA that matched the genetic profiles of all 3 victims. The fungus had been consuming their bodies continuously throughout the 6-week period, but so slowly that the process hadn't interfered with normal bodily functions. Instead of killing its hosts immediately, Ophiocordyceps cascadia had essentially been feeding on them while keeping them alive through an unknown biological mechanism. The victims had died of starvation because the fungus was consuming their caloric intake faster than they could replace it. But the organism had somehow maintained their basic physiological processes far longer than should have been possible. Microscopic analysis of the bone samples revealed fungal filaments that had grown throughout the skeletal structure while the victims were still alive. The filaments had replaced portions of bone marrow and nervous tissue, creating a symbiotic relationship that allowed the fungus to control basic motor functions even after brain death that had occurred. The triangle formation where the skeletons were discovered wasn't a position the hikers had chosen voluntarily. Was the final arrangement imposed by the fungal colony to optimize the decomposition process. Dr. Torres's team spent 4 days documenting the mature Ophiocordyceps cascadia colony before sealing the chamber permanently. Their research confirmed that the fungus had been growing in the underground cavern for at least 200 years, possibly much longer. The geometric patterns carved into the walls showed evidence of previous feeding cycles involving large mammals, bears, and possibly early human visitors who had stumbled into the cave system decades or centuries earlier. The research team's final report identified Ophiocordyceps cascadia as a previously unknown apex predator that had evolved specifically to exploit the cave systems. Created by ancient volcanic activity in the Pacific Northwest, the organism represented a unique evolutionary adaptation that allowed it to survive in completely sealed environments by creating its own food sources through behavioral manipulation of larger mammals. But the report also noted several biological anomalies that couldn't be explained by current scientific understanding of fungal behavior. The organism appeared to possess decision-making capabilities that suggested a level of intelligence far beyond what should be possible for a fungal colony. The geometric patterns it created were mathematically precise to a degree that implied conscious design, rather than random biological processes. Most disturbing was the evidence that Ophiocordyceps could somehow manipulate electronic devices to extend the transmission range of emergency beacons and cellular signals. The investigation officially concluded in January 2025 with a revised determination of accidental death caused by exposure to unknown biological hazards during recreational cave exploration. The case file was classified under biological research protocols that restrict public access for a minimum of 50 years. All GPS coordinates for the sealed chamber have been permanently removed from civilian databases and marked as restricted military training areas. Detective Mitchell submitted her final report with a recommendation that all cave systems in the Pacific Northwest be surveyed for the presence of Ophiocordyceps cascadia before issuing future exploration permits. The recommendation was accepted by the State Department of Natural Resources, but the survey process was classified as a public health investigation that doesn't require public disclosure of findings. Carmen Vasquez received her sister's personal effects in February 2025, including Elena's camera equipment and the clothing she was wearing when rescue teams found her skeletal remains. Among these items was Elena's backup camera, which had been overlooked in the original evidence inventory. The camera contained a single photograph that Elena had taken 3 days before their planned cave exploration trip. The photograph showed Elena, Marcus, and Daria standing outside a camping supply store in Seattle, loading their backpacks with the equipment they would carry into the underground chamber where they died. But in the background of the image, barely visible in the reflection of the store's front window, was the silhouette of a tall figure with arms that hung down past its knees. The figure appeared to be watching them from across the street, as if it had been following them even before they entered the cave system. Carmen Vasquez submitted the photograph to the King County Sheriff's Department, but Detective Mitchell had retired from active duty and the case file had been transferred to federal authorities. The photograph was added to the classified evidence collection with a notation that no further investigation was warranted based on existing biological research findings. The camping supply store where Elena took the final photograph closed permanently in March 2025. The building was purchased by a private investment company and demolished to make way for a parking lot. No forwarding address was provided for the store's previous owners, and employment records for the staff who worked there during Elena's visit were transferred to an undisclosed government archive. Radio operators in the Pacific Northwest continue to report emergency beacon signals from the sealed chamber's coordinates every March 15th. The signals now last exactly 6 hours and 28 minutes, twice the duration of the original distress call. They still begin transmitting at 11:47 p.m., but recent recordings have detected voice transmissions embedded in the beacon's electronic signal. The voice recordings are too distorted for clear identification, but audio analysis suggests 3 different speakers attempting to communicate simultaneously. The transmission quality improves each year, as if the signal source is becoming more powerful or the speakers are learning to coordinate their broadcasts more effectively. The most recent recording, captured on March 15, 2025, contained a brief message that was clear enough for transcription. "We found the exit, but we can't leave until someone takes our place. The tall man says the triangle needs to stay complete. We're still alive down here, but we can't stay alive much longer." The message lasted 14 seconds before dissolving back into electronic interference. No response protocols have been established for these annual transmissions, and federal authorities have classified all recordings as atmospheric anomalies unrelated to the original missing persons. Investigation. The sealed chamber remains accessible through mining tunnels that require specialized equipment and professional guides. Access permits are available through a private security company that doesn't advertise its services or provide contact information through public directories. The application process requires extensive background checks, psychological evaluations, and signed waivers acknowledging exposure to unspecified biological hazards. No exploration permits have been approved since Dr. Torres's research expedition in December 2024.